Live from their home studios, please welcome the hosts of DevCentral Connects, John Wagnon and Boo Lamb.
Well, hello, DevCentral community. My name is Boo, and I am your host today for DevCentral Connects. I'll bring on my co-host in just a second here, John Wagnon. I got joining with me today. We got an awesome show for you guys today, malware as a service. I think it's going to be a pretty cool topic. We've got a couple articles that we'll bring up and highlight with you folks, but we've got on two guests today, Malcolm Heath, and we got Sandra Vinberg, both from our F5 Labs team. So it should be pretty exciting to have a chat with them about this topic here. But without further ado, I'm going to bring on my co-host here. John, how you doing?
What's up, Boo? I'm doing great, man. It's good to see you today.
Yeah, likewise. Now, I know you and Jason always start off these shows with a fun question.
Yeah.
And this is going to be out of the blue, but there's a reason why I'm asking this. What is the most interesting meat you have consumed?
The most interesting meat?
Yes.
Man, I used to go to this, what we call a wild game dinner, like every year. It's the town I used to live in, and they would cook like alligator and shark, and it was all kinds of different stuff. And so that's probably the place that I have consumed the most interesting meat. I'm trying to remember like what the most interesting of that was. Maybe I remember alligator, and I remember like shark, and I remember like, but I think they had some ostrich there one time, which that's not a very common meat to just swing by the grocery store and be like, I'll take a pound of ground ostrich, right? So maybe that would be it.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. That's that you'd have to go to like a zoo or something and work out a deal. Or
I don't even know where they got it, to be honest with you. Some of those questions you're like, I'm just going to try to enjoy the meal and not ask too many like, how did you guys obtain said meat?
That might be on the second season of Tiger King.
Yes. No doubt. Well, how about you? Yeah. What's your craziest meat?
That's awesome. I think I've had ostrich before, perhaps at a Brazilian steakhouse.
Yes.
But yeah, so I've tried a few different things there. I recall eating a bunch of chicken hearts. We say this all. I should say this too. We say this all in the context of North America, right? Some of these foods are probably not that interesting in other parts of the world. Obviously, we have viewers worldwide.
Good point.
But yesterday, I'm gonna self-promote my own Twitter.
Yeah.
If you check out my Twitter, I went out for lunch with a colleague of mine who's from Australia. And we had some Australian meat pies. And so my Australian meat pie was kangaroo. And that's what I ate yesterday.
Okay, so hang on. So it looks like some kind of a crust, like a pot pie type thing. And then is that potatoes, like mashed potatoes, and then meat on top?
So the meat is baked inside. That's a layer of mashed potatoes there, and then that's mushy peas on top.
Oh, okay.
And so
gotcha.
Kind of like a shepherd's pie, but in a different order.
Gotcha. Yeah, same ingredients, just a different, different layers.
Yeah.
Different order of layers, I should say. Yeah. Good deal.
Yeah.
Good deal.
And if anybody was to ask me what did the kangaroo taste like, it tasted like beef to me. Well, you know what? I don't know if you saw how much gravy I had on that, but by the time you have that much gravy on there, it's all ground beef to me.
Yeah, that was one of my personal mantras when I was in the military and going through like the boot camp, kind of the where you got to get up crazy early and you got like 3 minutes to eat a meal. The gravy was my saving grace. I just personally said, hey, gravy makes anything go down quicker, and you don't even have to chew it up, right? Because we only were given like a small amount of time to eat. So yes, I'm a fan of the gravy. So hey, we've had a couple people chime in, it looks like, on some things that they've
What do we got here?
Let's see here.
Oh wow. Yeah,
dried lion. Interesting. It's like a jerky, maybe.
Yeah. If you can clarify, Alex, is that a jerky or what did you do there?
Or or just you cooked it too long.
Yeah, my cooking. What else we got here? Tongue from a cow. I think I've had a little bit of that before. I think at the Brazilian steakhouse.
Wow. The Brazilian steakhouse you're going to, Boo, sounds very very fascinating. It's awesome. The ones that I've been to are the typical, ribeye, sirloin, tri-tip, whatever. But yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah. No, we've got, well, it's changed around here, but yeah, there's another one that's opened up in its place, I think, and I haven't been to that one yet, but I'll have to check this out. Okay, Alex,
Gotcha.
it did reply here. So exactly, South African biltong, but then made of lion meat.
Lion meat. Okay.
Very cool.
All right. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
But
I love
it's very
having
cool,
this
but it sounds like it's rubbish though. So don't eat it. So fascinating response. Do not stay far away, right? Do not eat.
Yeah. That's cool. All right. So that's the question of the day today. If anybody else wants to chime in on foods that you've eaten that are interesting, you want to share, please do throw that into the chat. Otherwise, give us a second here and we will bring on our guests, Sander and Malcolm. Hello, Sander and Malcolm. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Doing well, thanks.
Awesome. So I think we may as well bring you guys into this conversation as well. We'll start off with Malcolm because you're on the first square there. What is the most interesting meat that you've eaten?
Oh, I almost want to say that I don't want to answer on the grounds that it may incriminate me. I've traveled a bunch over the course of my life, and I've always been interested in trying whatever the local stuff is. So I've eaten a lot of different things. But when you asked the question originally that I heard, what sprang to mind was alpaca meat when I was in Peru. It was actually really, really good. I really enjoyed that a lot. I had it a couple, 3 times. The cuy, the guinea pig, which is also traditional down there, is not as good. It's kind of gamey, and there's just the bone to meat ratio is all not the way you want it. But I mean, no offense to anybody who enjoys it, but it wasn't quite to my taste. Right.
Yeah. I kind of think about crab legs or, chicken wings or, it's like you got to do so much work to get to the meat. Right. So, similar thing.
Yeah. How about you, Sander?
Well, I don't know. When I heard you guys talking about it, my first thought was I don't think I've tried a lot of exotic meats. But then you guys were running down it. It's actually I had an ostrich burger in Laguna Beach, California, when I was a kid. Nice. I had some chicken hearts when I was traveling in East Africa. But honestly, my neighbor several years ago, 10 years ago, my neighbor who was a chef in Seattle gave me some bear meat that someone had given him. And he had made this unbelievable stew with it. And I was a little, I think bears are pretty magical, and I wasn't that psyched about eating something like that. But I was you got to try it. It's already cooked. It's already dead. So I tried it, and it was actually delicious. So bear is probably the most exotic, although these days I feel like they're all over.
Yeah, I've had a guy I go to the gym with goes hunting. Actually, he just got back about it yesterday. After getting some deer, but he hunts bear once in a while, and so he had some bear sausage and shared that with me. It was pretty good. It was spicy. Actually, it was a guy just on the other side of the U.S. border. I'm in Canada for folks who didn't know, but I think it was a guy who was just on the other side of the U.S. border over in Sumas. That did the sausages for him.
Cool. Yeah, it was funny. A couple of weeks ago, I got 2 packages from 2 different delivery drivers at the same time at my place, and they were both talkers. It was really funny. They wanted to chat, and so we ended up chatting about hunting, and it turned out that both of these package delivery drivers are really avid bear hunters. They gave me all this advice about it, and I was sort of thinking I don't really think I want to get into bear hunting, but good to know that there's so many people around, and it's I had no idea that people were as into it in northern Washington as they are. But
wow,
there you go. Yeah.
I guess so. Yeah, we're in the spot for that. Well, Sander, I think that's a great segue when we talk about hunting to actually talk about this first article that we wanted to chat about today, which was the topic of the show today was ransomware as a service. And Sander, you were the one that actually brought up this article here, Microsoft Digital Defense Report. If I can give some folks a really quick highlight from here, though, something that they shared. This report is written based on This number is astounding. 24 trillion daily security signals across Microsoft Cloud, endpoints, intelligent edge. Like, I can't even imagine how you're going to consume all of that data and then turn it into a report. But here it is. And these are some of the highlights from it. And ransomware is what was kind of featured in this part of the report here. Any initial comments on this, Sander?
Well, my first thought was that if this trend continues, that we have only really seen the beginning of the ransomware pain. And the reason I think that is that you tend to see a lot of variation in terms of the attack chain leading up to the actual ransomware malware, right? And some of that is going to be down to differences in the target environment, right? Because a lot of that is like finding all of the good locations to actually deploy the ransomware, which involves a lot of recon and living off the land and that sort of thing. But a lot of it is also down to the strengths and weaknesses of the threat actors that are developing these things. And so what we are hearing now, and this is not the only place that I've heard about this growth, but this was kind of one of the clearest articles about it, is that there was already a little bit of cooperation at the level of maybe you have a single threat actor group and they might have a specialist in different aspects of an attack, meaning they're really, really good at getting that initial foothold, or they're really, really good at mapping out an entire network and finding all the assets, or they're really good at developing the malware, right? It seems like there's starting to be a little bit more like intergroup cooperation and like kind of modularization. And that's where the service comes in, because it's not like saying, hey, let's team up and come up with a really good attack. It's saying, I will pay you for this capability, right? And when you get an open market like that, we're going to start seeing the strongest parts of every attack chain show up in every attack, right? So 2021 has been a pretty brutal year for ransomware. And I was sort of, I caught this article as I was rounding up a bunch of other reading, and I was like, oh man, it might get a lot worse. So that's my first reaction is we better hold on.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts from you, Malcolm, initially?
Well, one thing that just kind of occurred to me as Sandra was talking was there was a really interesting article from a few years ago that was written, or I think it was written about Marcus Hutchins, malware tech, if you remember. Uh-huh. There was that whole thing where he got arrested and like it was this whole big thing. Even though he was very much somebody who online was helping people get better at malware analysis and get into the field, and was definitely like, one of the good guys at the time. In his past, he had done some stuff that was sketchy, I guess. The thing that came out of that article was that when he started getting involved in that, it wasn't as if they were like, hey, do you want to be part of our malware gang? It was like some guy reached out and said, could you write me a program that did this? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so he wrote the program. And that's all he did. And that's all he knew. So I kind of wonder how much of, sort of essentially contracting happens with these groups. Or even just, and then it's pretty easy to see how a contractor would move to a more of a sales or a service model of like, hey, I don't know what you're doing, but like I have stuff that does X. You can buy it from me, you can rent it from me, that kind of thing. Right.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, John.
Well, I was going to say that, maybe some people say, I don't want to know what you're doing. Just if I can provide a service, an expertise, a skill, and you pay me. I'm thinking about some of this, the Boo's got it up here on the screen, the cryptocurrency wallets, the Bitcoin, the anonymous payment, and then you may have people that are laundering that. I mean, sometimes money laundering is kind of like, okay, you're doing something crazy, but there could be aspects of that it's like, okay, I just help people move money from here to there, whatever it is, and they don't even know how much ingrained they are in this criminal activity. So anyway, Sandra, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, not at all. It's just that there have been a lot of economic studies over the years that sort of noted that the point when a given market economy really takes off is when the labor for the products in that economy also take on a market aspect, right? Meaning it's like one thing if everybody's working communally and then they bring their products to market, but when the labor for that production is like basically a matter of bidding, then that's when you start to see this like incredible takeoff in productivity, right? That's like a well-established economic phenomenon. So my first thought when I read this thing was, from an economic standpoint, productivity for ransomware actors is probably about to go through the roof. And it's sort of funny because the market on the defender side for tools and for skills and for labor has always been like pretty open, and yet it seems like we end up sort of shooting each other in the foot and competing at the wrong level. And like I look at the attacker side these days, and I wish that we could collaborate and coordinate as well as those guys do, which is kind of frustrating to say, but that's what I think when I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, and when you mentioned the economics of it too, I kind of noted this part when I was reading it. After analyzing the intelligence that they get, they'll demand an appropriate ransom to not only unlock the victim systems, but also prevent public disclosure, double extortion model. But I found that interesting in that they price this out, like they size out what the ransom is going to be when they want to go present it.
It is supposedly a really, really core part of the model. Is like they don't want to put any organizations out of business, because then they're reducing the number of victims. And then they also know, like, every time that a deal is not struck, then the next person that they have to negotiate with is going to have fewer or like less trust that the whole thing is going to work out okay, right? So they picked, I'm told that they picked those prices very, very carefully to make sure that they get money, because if they don't get paid, the whole thing was kind of a waste, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
all the effort.
I find that fascinating. Yeah, so there's a sweet spot, Sander, like you said. You don't want to ask for too much. You bankrupt the company, they go under, then there's one less victim. But if you ask for too little, they could laugh you out of the room and say, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you're trying to maximize that sweet spot, right? Get it as high as you can, but not so high that you don't get it, or so low that you're not recouping your costs and making a profit, right? So
yeah, and actually I'm really glad you guys said that, because that sort of brings us around full circle to what we're starting to see here, because there's a lot of the intel about ransomware right now is kind of closed source, and we have to sort of like trust specific malware researchers or people that monitor the dark web to get a sense of what's going on here. But after the Colonial Pipeline attack in March or April of this year, I think in spring, which was obviously hugely impactful, made the news. Now ransomware is a sort of household concept, and that provoked that meeting between Biden and Putin. And after that, a number of ransomware groups kind of rolled it up, and they said, we're not going to operate anymore. Although what we have since learned is that a lot of that knowledge and a lot of, maybe not necessarily the entire piece of malware, but a lot of sort of concepts and architectures within that malware just showed up in another kind of malware. And so they just changed the name essentially, right? But that was also the moment when those ransomware actors rolled it up, was also the moment when the sort of ransomware as a service thing really started to be noticed by people monitoring the dark web, right? So essentially you can sort of, and I'm sort of speculating here, right? But somebody picked a big fat target, and it was successful, but it also brought a lot of attention down. The US government did end up recovering all that Bitcoin from the ransom payment anyway. What resulted was a lot of political heat, and then everybody had to kind of change their model, right? So I think if you sort of look at it in terms of the history of how this is going, if those guys if the Colonial Pipeline attackers, which I want to say was Revo, no, it was one of the other ones. It doesn't matter. If they had picked their target a little bit more carefully, if they had asked for a smaller ransom, if things had gone a little bit differently, the political heat wouldn't have come down on them. They might not have had to kind of reset their entire operation, which in turn would have led to this commodification thing going a different way. So it's really sort of interesting to see how this thing is evolving in real time.
We've got a good comment there, basically completely run by businessmen. I guess we could think of the groups as a business in themselves, and ransomware in general as the market.
Yeah, I mean, they call their victims, they call them clients, which I think is hilarious, right? So they don't like to call them victims. They like to say, oh, you are now a client of the Gant Crab or the Revil or Ryuk or Babook or whatever. And they treat it like a business. There's a little bit of sort of, we don't know if it's variance or just inconsistency in terms of how much they care, right? The Gant Crab guy, the original guy who developed the malware and was farming it out to affiliates, was extremely explicit that he did not want people going after healthcare organizations. He didn't want, like, there was one instance where one of his affiliates went after a Syrian target during the sort of height of the Syrian civil war, and a bunch of Syrian civilians lost access to data, and he gave them the key back because he's like, this isn't what we're here for. We're not here to make people's lives bad. We're just here to make money. Mm-hmm. And then there have been other times where there have been ransomware attacks against hospitals, and there are at least anecdotal reports that humans have directly died as a result of this thing. So it's like, I don't want to sit here and say like, oh, they're so honorable, because I think that some probably are and some are not. But it is a business. They're here to make money. The folks that are in this game to not make money are usually the ones that we don't hear very much about.
That that kind of brings us to this graphic from the article 2. Is you mentioned the sectors, or a couple of sectors there, but the top sectors that they highlight: consumer retail, insurance, financial, manufacturing, agriculture. Although, we were kind of chatting about this before, the other ones, it's a pretty, not, I wouldn't say even spread, but it is spread across all the verticals, really.
Yeah. It's I would call it a pretty even distribution, right? Of course, there's 9% of other, and that might be 17 different tiny little categories or something. But when I look at this without seeing any more data, I don't see a huge pattern screaming at me. I see a basic indication that this is probably not the thing driving. What I mean is, sector is probably not the target attribute that is driving the most decision making among attackers. That's what I would guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a common thing. When I was in the field in sales, talking to customers about cybersecurity, you so often get that comment of, "Hey, our business is not going to be a target for attackers," and I've seen everybody get attacked. For all sorts of businesses. It's just it doesn't matter. And I'll pivot to this. There's another article that we wanted to bring up here too, from Krebs. This one here, they were doing phishing on Coinbase, specifically for Italian users. And what they did was they targeted specifically .it addresses for Italy, and this was actually kind of a service that they built as well. Whoever was the attacker, as they were, they used automation to figure out who actually had valid Coinbase accounts, and so they would rapidly register accounts. I think down here they noted, in one day, 216 email addresses were registered, and they weren't registering them to use them; they're registering them to invalidate emails off of the list, and then figure out which emails were left that were actually valid Coinbase accounts. So this is one where, and Coinbase has a statement here. Obviously, F5 has our automation prevention solutions, and Coinbase notes that they have whatever they have for prevention of automation. But a topic that comes up for F5 regularly here. But doing that, they had this page set up. They could drive people to the page, and then there was a point where you could actually get on the attacker side, they would get an audible noise, a ding or something like that, to say, "Hey, somebody's hit the phishing site. Go interact with them now," and go prompt them for their 6-digit 2-factor code, which they would enter into the phishing page, which the attacker would then take and enter into the Coinbase page, and then off to go from there. There's automation at scale to pull off these attacks.
And interesting because there's a lot of information that's like, multi-factor one-time passwords through SMS are better than nothing, but they're not as good as doing it through the app like that. And which is true. That's all true. And yet, there's always more ways around it. There's always kind of tricks and hacks. This is pretty clever. I like it.
Yeah.
I find it really fascinating that they use the technique of registering many email addresses or attempting to, in order to do like a reverse check to see which ones are valid. If I'm understanding what the article said correctly. The fact that you can, well, I mean, I guess you wouldn't necessarily have to have an actual legitimate email for that, but it made me think of the ways that a lot of times these malware networks will register domains that are a couple of letters off from a target to create more realistic phishing sites, and how easy and automated that process is. Like they can turn around a registration so fast, and at such scale. That's something that I don't think we've really paid too much attention to, honestly. I was just hearing from a guy I was talking to about how they actually have a feed coming in of recently registered domains that they check against a list of their clients. And if it's semantically close to one of their client domains, they alert the client to say, you may be being targeted like right now with some form of impersonation of your site in order to implement phishing or subvert email or something along those lines, right? I thought that was a really novel idea.
Yeah,
that's a totally great idea. In that article, they registered coinbase.com.password-reset.com. Was what they grabbed there.
Yeah. And Boo, really quick, I was going to comment on that actually. The coinbase.com.passwordreset.com. So the coinbase.com is this arbitrary subdomain, I think is the words that they use to describe that part of the actual target domain. And one of the fascinating things, and I've thought about this a little bit, is with the proliferation of mobile devices. Myself, full disclosure, I'm an iPhone user, right? I've got my iPhone. I do all my stuff like everybody else does. And so when you visit that page, that URL, you're probably just the real estate on the top of your address bar. You're going to see coinstar.com. You're not going to see the rest of it probably, right? Now some browsers do a better job of showing you the site or not or whatever, but it's been fascinating to me. I've gotten some different phishing emails where just based on the real estate of the iPhone screen itself, if I open up my mail application, right, my email application, and then I go to just delete the email because it's like I want this phishing email out of my life. The link to click, that is the malicious link, is so close to where my little trash can delete button is that sometimes you could inadvertently click the link, right? And I've just found it fascinating the creativity of some of these phishers. So anyway, I just want to mention that.
It's like they have a user experience designer, like a UI dedicated UI designer as a service to design their phishing
as a service. Yeah.
If
Really
only
cool,
the user
guys.
experience was as good on the actual products, then I would be as happy. But it's like, not to like beat a drum, but I feel like every aspect is better on the attacker side. Like the customer support is better, the UX is better, the uptime is better. I don't know.
It's crazy. It's totally backwards. Yeah.
You know what? We'll one point I'll make on that is, I think we've had Dan Woods on before in previous shows, and he talks about how he actually went on as a captcha solver, right? He rented himself out as a captcha solver, and he wasn't keeping up with the SLA, I believe, that some of the other captcha solvers were able to deliver. So he was actually not making as much money as some of the pros were, wasn't able to keep up. So they want a level of service, even as a service.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So we're about at time here. I'm gonna shuffle you and Malcolm and Sander off. Thank you very much for joining us today, guys. I think your guys' LinkedIn links are in the comments on the YouTube comments there. So scroll up and give these guys a follow for some of the content. They're constantly releasing content from F5 Labs. So really cool to see. But thanks for coming on today, guys.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yep.
Good to see you guys.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Be right back. All right. Well, that was a cool show today.
It was awesome. It was awesome. And I do think about some of the practical applications of this. It's really good to talk about ransomware and the targets and just the way that they commoditize things or plan things, whatever. But for the end user, I just find it fascinating that phishing emails or phishing attacks still are like probably the primary method to get at victims, or clients, I guess, if you're a ransomware guy. Right? So
it works, and they're doing it at scale.
Yeah. So don't click those malicious links, even if they're right next to your little delete button on your iPhone or whatever. But and pay attention to the URL, the domain that you're visiting. So those are still good practical tips, right?
Absolutely. All right. Just with the actually, we're 1 minute over time, so I'll wrap up here. Well, first of all, just want to thank everybody for watching. If you like this content, hit like on it. Hit subscribe if you're watching from YouTube. If you found us on LinkedIn, hit follow on there, or head over to youtube.com/DevCentral and give us a subscribe on there. Maybe you're on Twitter or Facebook as well. So head on over to YouTube. You'll get more notifications that way. I will highlight a couple shows that we got coming up here. I'm not going to say too much about this one because I'm going to roll a little bit of a intro for this at the end here. But next Tuesday, I'll be on At the Edge, which is my show on Tuesday, 9:30 a.m. Cut to the Edge, and I'll talk about that in a second here. Next Thursday, DevCentral Connects TLS in 2021. The report is out, so we'll have on David Warburton, great guest, and we'll talk about the latest F5 Labs report that was released on TLS. And then, actually, John, you got Security Sidebar deeper into the dark web.
That's right. Yeah. So really quick on that, me and John Cianferrani from Shape. He's a dark web expert, among many other things. We had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about just what is the dark web. And now we're going to dive a little deeper into it to see what happens there, some different tools that people use and different things that they do. So it'll be a super interesting conversation.
Yeah, that one would be cool. The first one was great already, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. And then on the 11th, I won't be on for that one. That's you and Jason, and you'll be talking about the new OWASP Top 10. So
that's right.
Great lineup. Cool. So that wraps it up for today. Thank you, John, for joining me on this one. And again, if you like the content, hit like, hit subscribe, and otherwise, we will see you on Tuesday.
All right. Thanks, Boo.
Hey, everyone. 2 things I got for you today. First thing, I highly recommend going outside. It's pretty good for your health. I'm about to step outside myself. Second thing, my next episode of At the Edge will be next week, Tuesday at 9:30 Pacific time. And my guest will be Nick Garkusha. Now, if you've ever visited simulator.f5.com, his team is actually responsible for a lot of the stuff that you see on there. And that's a really great tool for getting up to speed on F5 products. Now, they recently released some GitHub repos that spin up a Volterra environment really quickly. And I know a lot of people are trying to get up to speed on that platform right now. And so with those GitHub repos, you'll be able to do that. And Nick will show us really quickly how you can do that. And so that's next week, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, Tuesday, November 2nd. At the Edge. We'll see you there.